illustrate the faults of entertaining this mind of this self-cherishing mind. But you may wonder, what really is this self-cherishing mind? What is it really all about? So here then, it is important to understand what is meant by self-cherishing, or this self-cherishing attitude, because without this understanding, what we've gone through and what we're going to read through in a moment will not have much meaning. In order to illustrate this, we can look at the writings of the first Panchen Lama, Losang Chugi Gyaltsen, within which he said, initially through seeing the faults of the self-cherishing attitude. So here then, the self-cherishing attitude is laid out as having faults. So let us first identify self-cherishing. What does this mean? In general, we talk about cherishing something. We talk about holding it very dear. So in the same way, this attitude holds oneself very dearly, very closely, and wishes then to have the well-being for oneself at the expense of everybody else. This is then what is meant by self-cherishing. So you may think, well, it's right to have this attitude. We should, want what is the best for ourselves. But does the self-cherishing attitude actually deliver or not? This is what we should investigate and we should take our time to reflect upon. In general, we say that we have been born since time and time again, since beginningless time, in countless existences. The cause of all these existences is none other than this self-cherishing attitude. The reason why we're still in difficult or unpleasant circumstance is again because of this self-cherishing attitude which holds on to wishing the best for oneself alone, and in dependence upon that, engaging or entertaining the variety of destructive emotions, and in dependence upon that, making action or engaging in action or karma, and the result of which is that we are kept within this dissatisfying state of existence. So this then we should understand is all due to entertaining this self-cherishing attitude. So that's with regard to the long term. So then what about the short term? Let us use some kind of worldly examples. For example, physical actions are quite gross, so if we utilize them in regard to a particular country, there are rules against stealing, killing, rape, etc. If we were to think of this attitude then of a kind of self-cherishing, wishing to have the best for oneself at the expense of others, if somebody causes us a little bit of discomfort, this is seemingly taking away our well-being. So if we kill that person, then we get rid of that kind of temporary kind of niggling, or that temporary kind of state of dissatisfaction. So that self-cherishing attitude, wishing to have the best for oneself at the expense of somebody's life, is that which propels one to generate anger, which culminates in the taking of life. In the same way with stealing, in the same way with physical atrocities such as rape, beating, etc. These all come about through one's attitude of self-cherishing. So then, within Panchen Rinpoche's writings, what we find is that we should identify this and then recognize this as not the kind of saving friend, or which it seems to be, but rather look at it honestly, openly, and see the faults of this self-cherishing attitude. And after having seen the faults thereof, one should then turn away from this attitude. Then one can do the various practices which destroy this self-cherishing attitude. That is to say, reversing or negating the objects and the mindset itself. So of this self-cherishing attitude, and these instructions will follow.
yunde tamchi ki chidan tenda hayi bi yunde malu ban chuno gota bi nyega kadu ki yawa malu ba ki tela tenen chuda arele sana sebo lo di sheba yena bana sinje khela jeba zone ane jimba ka sinje jana ga la jeba zone ane sinje dela be de nyoche pone sudun sunga ana je sinje jeba zone sinje de ga rana do bana nede be chudo lo so ba tede khare cheba yena chim nyam ba chen suba ba e do dane yen jinje ga sawa cheba la de jibe nyamne sudun de nyamne zube nyamne 또 그거는 이거. 내가 많은 집을 소요 삼바 될때 아니 세계나라 참바고 인제고 세계 단계가 좀 나가는 거 야다도 좀 산지지 고만 토반데 장주가 세면 신경을 때는 게. 내도 단계 말아서 산지지 고만 토반 될래야 산지가 신경이 같이 치도 양반이 있지. 그다음에 내도 단계 마게 신경을 하장기 같은 친구들이 대연도 단에 마게 신경은 기본 손에 로 현진의 로 컴플레이트 라진의 로 대마 본은 어디 들리죠 그 전에 가르쳐 나만에 다다 봐도 라지 벌송 제 야와권에 돼요 단에 손게 로종 그냥 제발할 때에 라 야와도 이제 번째 로디 듀레 제바yen 안 제바진 거랑 하는 게 뭐투로
So then, seeing the faults of which arise through cherishing oneself above all others, let us now turn our attention to those others. Again, and Rinpoche from the same text goes on to state as seeing the qualities of one's kind mother sentient beings, both in the short and long term of one's spiritual practice. So here, the meaning of this is, in general, we don't really consider others too much, in the sense that they're just there, but we do not engage them so much. But other sentient beings have, in the past, as we've gone through it for the past few days, been at one time or another our kind parents, or have the experience of being our kind parental beings, parents. So here then, reflecting upon that in the long term, but also in the short term, with regard to one's spiritual practice, whether others know it or not, they are responsible for our spiritual practice, in the sense that in dependence upon others, we are able to practice spiritually, whether directly or indirectly, whether others know it or not. In dependence upon others, just being there, one is able to advance on the spiritual path. For example, if there were no other sentient beings, how could we possibly engage in the first of the six perfections of charity? Because there would be no object to offer to. If there were no others, how could we possibly abstain from harming others? That is to say, how would one be able to engage in the perfection of restraint with regards others? If there were no others to test one's patience, then how would one be able to kind of engage in the practice of patience, of not retaliating, etc.? So all of this then arises, all of these qualities then arise in dependence upon others. So whether like it or not, sentient beings are extremely important for our spiritual development. So even though they may not know this, even though we may not have direct contact, nevertheless, they are responsible for our spiritual development, culminating in Buddhahood. As it is mentioned, then with regard to kindness shown then, or in the field of accomplishing the Buddhahood, sentient beings and the Buddhas are equal, both of which provide the fuel for that, achieving the state of complete and perfect Buddhahood. So in that way then, when we see others, we see the kindness which they are showering upon us with regard short and the long term, and one's interest in wishing to repay that starts to kind of smoke starts to kind of develop.
Oh yeah. I didn't. Dornas, that my conduct, Donna wood and Jubilee, and the man was good. My idea that to me, so I had a lemon. So I'm on Lord Duna. Most was Sidian and didn't come back to go on about Kasa. Remember the around the camper that go to Samaru, Sidian Gunapa. Yeah. Julia, most of that. The old Sidian Tamdi, the old David Judah, then a timber, never dug it, send the son of Dane, so the old to the Sidian party. Sidian David Judah. Go up to the Sindian party. Junior did the old humanity. David took you up. Most of the other for the order, Luda sent the order, simple no joy in that, and it did most of party. Junior David took you up to the Sindian party. My idea that the Magia Sindian never done Sidu, give me the order. Very true, and then to do some more. Some of the Hana to lend to the shows, and so and so shows. A day, but enough. Only answering him. That he never gave one and don't want the lambas. That's that I came in with him. The one do by him, but now, you never do by him, but younger. That's Yambas. Here to the da, singing, Children. 하나 소소 찍으면 미치고 예세게 타이에바 나가다냐 뭐 에다 다다 얘기가 나네 얘기 시작 계속 마다 노 찍고다 타이에바니 전에 타이에를 건다 듣기차 에도 다네 데도 다네 다 소소 되게 여 손네 타이에베 신경이 변치기 이상도 되네 근데 Rangi Gawata, Dividu Gawatu, Sindian Hata. Sindian Namji, Yungada, Yungitu, Siba Megawatu, Mana Suli, that's the name. Then only Roland can be Sinduchi, Chanda India have somebody, Roland Sinduchi, Joyce, Sanju Sindi, India Lava and Soba. What did they Sindian did enable Ned to long, Sindian and long the two God, Randy Denibe, Nabuyeva and Marshone, Inge Rankin and Panama. Rangi the water, Rangi the water, David to go out to Pache, Sindian and did Nabu and Marshone, Sindian Tanti, the water temperature on some percent, but then Sindian Dunak in Yamtaba to Dunak good and Table Perne. And if you are tempted that they were something, only none to the connection, Rangi the water, Pata, Jim to Dunak to Sudan, Tom Lenson, Mayate, Rangi the water, David to give out to Pata. Jim, Dunak the Dunak to give up the girl to Sudan, so that the letter in that, and the calling in the bus. As you never give one, and then the calling in the bus.
Verse 7 then goes on to read, in short, may I offer both directly and indirectly all joy and benefit to all beings, my mothers, and may I myself secretly take on all of their pain and suffering. So here, this is the actual instruction for destroying the self-cherishing attitude. Within this, then it's giving some kind of background, thinking of oneself as just one individual and others as being limitless. So how much right and how better it is to focus upon the welfare of limitless others than just oneself. So directly and indirectly, however, if one can offer benefit and joy to others, then one should do that as much as possible, directly by perhaps giving something, perhaps entertaining in a certain way, and indirectly then through the meditation instruction which is going to be given. So here then, with regard to all sentient beings, which are called my mothers here, as we mentioned over the past couple of days, all sentient beings having had the experience of being one's kind parents. So meditating upon equanimity and having developed that, then one can engage in the exchange of self and others. So here then, the actual technical term is equalizing and exchanging oneself with others. So equalizing refers to the meditation instruction which was given day before yesterday, and the exchange then refers to the exchanging one's attitude. One's attitude here then refers to exchanging the self-cherished or the self-centered attitude with one which is primarily concerned with working for others' benefit. So for this then, one can do the following technique after having brought to mind the faults of cherishing oneself at the expense of others, and the benefit of cherishing others over oneself. Then one should imagine all the difficulties or pain, suffering of others in the form of black colored smoke, which one inhales and then breathes in through one's right nostril. And this then takes on the aspect of that which will destroy the self-cherishing attitude which one visualizes in one's heart. So this kind of taking on of others' pain and suffering destroys one's self-cherishing attitude. And then in the wake of that, one exhales all of one's well-being and happiness and offers that to limitless sentient beings. So thus then one has exchanged one's attitude from being concerned with oneself at the expense of others, or self-centered, self-cherishing attitude. One has exchanged this with an attitude which is primarily concerned with others' well-being. And thus then one practices this meditation privately and generates this kind of attitude which wishes then to be of service to others. The last line then gives us some advice for practice. May this practice of exchanging oneself, equalizing and exchanging oneself for others, not be defiled by the concepts of the 8 mundane concerns. So here, when one engages in this practice, one should do so in a very honest and open way, without trying to impress oneself or one's friends, etc. Without any kind of worldly or mundane concern. One should purely engage in this practice, and then through that, aware that all objects or all activity do not exist in the way they appear to exist. Free from grasping at the kind of seemingly concrete or autonomous existence of phenomena, one is then freed from the bondage of adherence thereto.
나야 그 덴마크가 나가야 되는데 덴마크가 나나야 덴마크가 신발 매버 전에 로를 개버 치고 거기서 내가 주막신지 교회당 신라 소바 다운도 나가야 되는데 그 신발야 뭐 그런 게 아니 그거 그래서 제가 하고 온 게 되네 그거 좀 힘만도 지게 교회 신다 다다 넘어치를 부여 맞을 삼네 정말 다다 넘어치 하나요 다다 넘어치 신발 매버 나시 말아줘도 되네 denzengi shambate mama shimchimbo yoba yenda te denangi mama lyoba yenda denpa choba nangi wari de yena semgi denpa mea samba chene naya denpa mebe churto na ane jume tinzen se de nawa nanji denpa choba shamba juma yungwa teta nyesu da nanzu mitumba sheba tela juma sheba asba te sheba laya tomba niyo tanda te zapo yendo tanda ta chira nuzo mingo de 얘네 또만이 그다 농촌에 나와 얘나 추요 강다 강이나요 다실래야 노지도 또배 봤다 봤다 다가라 하네 걔네 걔네 또 유수지요 마 세야지 다시 풍봉가는 마 세는 아빠가면 내 마음도 지기 유람도 원래 그거 하지요 걔는 풍봉하고 세례 때는 마요 그거를 띄요 주지 풍봉하면 거의 풍봉하면 누지기 보면 남아 누지기 보면 남아 남아 집에 공부대를 싫어하고 그거 쳐고요 우마 란지가 민기기 남아 집에 다 인스케리 거 이게 남아 집에 다 레서 말아도 도바서월에 남도서월에 그 용이야 남아 집에 다 말이 남아 집에 다 매바 가르려서 남아 집에 다 녀월랑제 다디 녀월 해먹고 이게 또 공공나 녀월란자당 다디 녀월레 먹을 봐. 대도 가는 공공나 녀월란자 인도 나시기 공부대 다디 녀월란자리. 대도 나시기 공부대 다디요. 녀월란자 다 녀월레 먹고니 로가 고아 타제로 고아는 마도 지인 이거 다다게 녀월란자 예선은 지금도 와. 대다 넘버 10을 다 멤버 가르쳐서는 다게 녀월란자 예선에 다 멤버지 지금 सत्योड़ होते थे अच्छी टुटे के बच्चे बच्चे भी ना दाचू के राजी के मधु दे कुंभो ता राजी के टुटे के ता थे खानो तो मधु में चेर इंजे में के ता रहते हैं ओंबा नी दे मुझे कुछ सोना ता यांदा रहते हैं तो बचाओ वो मोटर के ता यांदा रहते हैं तो ये ता दाचू के कुंभो ता राजी के टुटे के तो मधु के 공부다 라지 주주를 끼도 좋나 야면은 공부가 요가 나시 다 했나요 야면은 다 지금도 내가 나시 공부하고 뒤에 끼요 이 지금도 와 공부하고 뒤에 있으나 남아시바다 조지 뒤에 있으나 지금도 와 근데 살아가는 리벤지 뭐가 칸에다 가면서 남는 내가 말고 내지 뭐 리벤지 조지다 내지 쓰는 용어가 봐 그래서 가자들은 뇌지 다 노제들은 시지 된 공부. 대연도단에 다들 공부도 라지 주주를 지이나 야만은 공부가 요반지 나가요. 야만은 다지도 세반지 공부가 있지도 주고는 가야. 대선도단에 다들 공부도 라지 주주를 지마이 다지. 다들 공부도 라지 주주를 다지이나 다들 공부도 다지 연발라 리빈이지 요만 다도 공부니 하데 녀월란데다 녀월레 먹고 다데 녀 lembaboda 공부데 녀월란데 하데 예바라 리빈이지 요 라신 주주가 타데바 얘나 유나게 오는 주가 타데 얘나 얘나 라말레 주주 타데 얘나 데메 되지 얘나 데메 공부 무슨 알아만 봐 다 무슨 도 요 되게 공부 자와 멤버 다그 자와 좀 보고하니 이 용식도 그다음 내가 임도단에 다도 공부니 다시 주주가 타데이나 데메 되지 보고하니 대에다 되게 되지 되지 가장 타도 다도 공부니 다시 주주가 타데 다시 주주가 타데에 다시 주주가 끼면 다시 주주가 용식만 이거는 제다한테 바로 요구를 제다한테 바로 좀 해야 돼 보고를 다시 주주가 제다한테 바로 좀 해야 다시 되면 보고를 얘나 다게 다시 주주가 민도로서
So the last two lines then, where that all things are illusory and then ungrasping, be freed from bondage. So here then this is teaching us that all appearances are illusory-like. So what does that actually mean? So and what do we actually gain out of seeing all appearances as mere illusions? Here when we think about what is meant by illusion, if we think of an illusionist or a magician, then that individual is able to conjure up all manner of things through the force of his kind of bag tricks, whether through the force of his recitation or his various magical substances, whatever. He is able to kind of transform. In ancient India, the examples of stones and sticks, he is able to allow them to appear in the form of horses and elephants and so forth. So when these horses and elephants appear to such an individual, the conjurer, then they appear as elephants and horses. But this person does not have any kind of attachment to them, to their ferocity, to their beauty, to their cuteness, etc. This individual is completely devoid of being enchanted by such appearances, because he knows that the way they actually abide is completely different from the way they are actually appearing. So when we talk about something being illusory, then it appears in one way, but actually exists in another way. So when we talk about appearances to our consciousness, or the doors of our consciousness, when this appears, then we are taught that they're illusory. So they must be appearing in one way and actually existing in another way. So then what does that mean? So here it is impossible to view things as illusory-like and therethrough grasping onto those appearances, unless one has an understanding of emptiness or shunya, or the way of abiding of a phenomena. So this is something incredibly difficult to understand, and we're also very limited by time. But just to give you a hint of what is meant by emptiness, or the mode of abiding and the mode of appearance of a phenomena, then I will just hint at what is meant by the view of emptiness. So here, when we talk about phenomena appearing to us, and ourselves, of course, we talk about their appearing as seemingly solid and existing autonomously in and of themselves, or inherently. However, all phenomena without exception are mere conceptual they are merely implied by conceptual mind, or are verbally designated as this or that, as me and mine, etc. These are just mental constructs from the side of the object. There is no autonomous existence whatsoever. So this is the kind of ground. Things appear to exist autonomously, but actually they are completely devoid of that. They are dependent upon the conceptual or verbal designation to appear and exist in a certain way. So with regard to oneself as an individual who seemingly exists from our own side autonomously, if we actually investigate what is this I, seemingly inherent identity within us, there's nothing we can find or point to which is that. So does that mean we don't exist at all, you may wonder? Of course we exist. We eat and we walk, but how do we exist? That is the question. And this should be answered by utilizing correct reasoning, because the actual way of abiding phenomena, or the empty nature of phenomena, is not an extremely hidden phenomena. It is something which is slightly hidden, and as such can be understood in dependence upon a correct sign. That is to say, through correct reasoning, we can understand how phenomena actually exist, and how they then, therethrough, how they actually appear. Then, through that understanding, we can understand the illusory nature of appearance. Understanding that, we can be free from bondage. Bondage here that refers to grasping onto inherent existence within phenomena. So the reasoning which is given, the subject, let's say, oneself, for example, then the thesis, lacking autonomous existence, and the reason for being devoid of the subject I, oneself, being devoid of autonomous existence because of being, or because of lacking autonomous existence as singular or as separate from the five aggregates which make up or constitute our being. So here then, this debate about I or this inherent identity is of paramount importance, because when we talk about the body, if we look within the body, we cannot find something which we can point to and say, this is my identity, this is me. But when it comes to the other four aggregates, feeling, conception, formation, and consciousness in itself, it's easy to dispense with the first three because they are temporary kind of states of mind, but it's the consciousness or the stream of consciousness which all the philosophical tenets from the Svantatika Madhyamika downwards have a misconception about, saying that this constitutes an autonomously existent I, or an inherently existent self or identity. But this is negated by the proponents of the higher philosophical tenets when they say that it is actually the consciousness which takes up the identity. So identity exists, but it's taken up upon an aggregation of particles. It is a designation upon that aggregation. So how can the particles themselves have what they are to take up? That would infer that there are two identities, one which is an inherent part of the mind stream or consciousness, and one which is then taken up by that consciousness when it comes together with the physical side of one's being, and then is given a name, whatever one's respective name is, we could use as the example. So in order to negate this, one should look using the correct reasoning, such as the one I just mentioned, of lacking autonomy with regard to being singular or separate from these five aggregates which make up our being. So if this I exists, it should exist as autonomous, as being singular with regard to physical and mental makeup, if we condense the two. So the I, if we look for it within the confines of the elemental structure of our body, we cannot find something to point to and say, this is the autonomously existent I. And with regard to the mind, just as we can divide the mind into various numbers, if the identity was inherently one with the mind, just the same way we should be able to divide this identity up into a number of autonomously existent I's, just as there are the amount of autonomously existent mental states. So here then, we cannot find the I as autonomously existent or as concretely existent, or something we can tangibly grasp hold of with regard to our physical side and with regard to the mental side. So then you may say, well, this self then must be inherently other than the five aggregates. So here the emphasis is on inherently other than the aggregation of the physical and mental aggregation of our being. So if this was the case when we look within the body and within the mind, then there should be something left over that we can point to and say, this is the autonomously existent identity. This is me, so to speak. But then that just becomes absurd. Of course, we can say that the identity and the aggregation is separate, but it's not autonomously separate. And this is the point when we talk about separation. Here, the emphasis on autonomously being separate, giving autonomous or inherent existence to one's identity, and therefore to the characteristics which make up the mind and also to the body. So if one understands that, it is absurd to say that the identity is something which is inherently or concretely separate from the physical and mental constituents of one's being. So through this reasoning that our identity is not autonomously or inherently one with or separate from the aggregation of body, feeling, conception, formation and consciousness, we can start to understand the way phenomena actually abide. And this is to be something which is understood through repeated familiarization, utilizing this particular line of reasoning, utilizing the subjects of oneself and other objects, seeing how they appear in one way, how that appearance cannot be real because it is in disaccord with the actual mode of abiding of that particular object. And through continual familiarization with these reasonings, what happens is that the power or the sharpness of the reasoning increases, grasping onto then the kind of the object of negation, that is to say inherent existence, lessens, and naturally the correct way of viewing the world comes in, or rather is perceived by us. So this is the difference between the two. Here then, when one goes into understanding the way of abiding of phenomena, one does so in dependence upon correct reasoning, and there through one is then actually able ultimately to establish this for oneself. So I would like to request you to, from time to time, take out these instructions and reflect upon them. If you could do that for a couple of minutes in the morning and in the evening, whenever you have time, that would be great. And if you could try to implement them as much as possible in your daily life, that would be great. Of course, you should understand that, as explained in the text, going to isolated places, etc., is something incredibly difficult, next to impossible, but nevertheless, because we have to go to work, etc. But nevertheless, if we can just familiarize ourselves with the subject on a daily basis, then there's every hope that slowly we'll be able to develop in some capacity the spiritual qualities which are extolled within these writings.